Welcome to Sons of Patriarchy. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to take a moment to provide a content warning. In this episode, we'll be discussing sensitive topics, including emotional, spiritual, and sexual abuse. We understand that these subjects can be triggering for many listeners. If you find yourself feeling uncomfortable or need to take a break, please feel free to pause or skip to a later segment. Your well-being is our top priority. We encourage you to reach out for support if you need it. There are resources available to help you through difficult times, and these can be found in our show notes and intake forms to private support communities, which are screened. Thank you for being here with us today. Welcome to A Museum for Saints, Abuse in the CREC, Part 7. In this episode, I speak with Jade Miller, a former Lagos School student, and an anonymous man whose formative years through early parenthood were spent at a few CRECs throughout the Pacific Northwest. Being a sinner is difficult in the CREC because there's so many saints around you, and you're too often compared to them. So we begin with Jade's story, a story that might strike you as similar to Emily Dye's from Groomed to Submit. She was told, from a very early age, that she was dangerous. She was no saint. Here's the story in full.
Yeah, so I am Jade Miller. I went by JD Cole when I was at Logos. My family, my mother and my sister and I moved up to Moscow from southern Idaho so that my mom was engaged to David Cole. So they were planning the wedding, etc. And I started to go to Logos when I was in sixth grade, and my sister was in first grade. So right away, we were part of the church. My stepdad to be was already part of Doug Wilson's church and had started going, I think, all the way back in the garage days. When I started going to Doug Wilson's church, he was a fairly jolly, bearded man that played his guitar and sang with a lot of joy. We didn't baptize babies, none of that. That was all to come.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I met. It was a very small church, pretty happy place. I was dealing with a lot of just childhood trauma already, and the method that we used in our family is we don't talk about what happened in the past because everything is new now, and it's all forward from here. So that was definitely, I know, affecting me. But that's my first foray into Logos and
Gotcha.
Dutton's church.
So, as a young girl, what was it? You started, I guess, middle school ish. What was it? What was it like? What was the culture like at Christ Church? What was the culture like at Lagos? What are your memories? Your formative memories in these communities, and then how did it shape you as we get into your story?
Yeah. So I think it wasn't even called Christ Church at that time, right?
No,
It
it
was
was
something.
Community Evangelical Fellowship.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it was, like I said, really small and a really just easy place to be, easier than the Baptist church that I'd been part of, which was, going to church many times a week, and it seemed easier. I initially felt very grateful to be at Logos. My public school education experience had not been good
Hmm.
at all. I had a lot of bullying from teachers and students, and I felt more accepted at Logos. My class was very small. I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and that stayed the case all the way. I was part of a very small class all the way through um, 12th grade. So, with a few changing of the guard as far as the other students, but a very small, intimate class. My favorite class and my favorite teacher by far was English, Mr. Callahan's English class. We loved it, and I loved writing and I loved reading. It was my safe place. So I liked way that Logos put the emphasis on reading and writing, and um, it wasn't a negative experience really for me. I also found a lot of solace in theater, and Tom Garfield was the director, started a theater program shortly after I got there, and I loved it. I loved it so much, and he was very kind to me and worked a lot with me. So that was the
Hmm.
first, despite a lot of really, really, really hard things going on at home. Um, I I felt good about it. It wasn't a negative experience.
Hmm. So those who are listening were like, "Oh, Jade had a good time at Logos, had a good time at Christ Church. Why is she on Sons of Patriarchy talking? Because this seems like a happy story,
Right.
until it's not a happy story. So it seems like things went well, and then it seems like things didn't go well because you're not on here to talk about all the good things that happened to you. You're talking
Right.
about the traumatic things that happened.
Hmm.
So if you can, what was that? I can't imagine it was just like one day things went poorly, and you're like, uh-oh,
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
there's probably a little bit of a trajectory in there where it started seeping in. So what was it like coming from, hey, this place is my solace, this place I get to write, I get to read, they put emphasis on this, into I don't know if I don't know if I like it here anymore, and things are happening that are not my happy place anymore.
Hmm.
So what was that transition like from happy place to this is not my happy place anymore?
Yeah, I think it, and of course, this is all from this perspective of just of a kid, right?
Yeah.
With a lot of emotional baggage. Um, it's that the whole notion of me being almost a dangerous girl and someone who needed extra help and extra care or else, right? That just became this theme that got stronger and stronger as I was at Logos. It was eighth grade, and this teacher, I would name him if I could, but I cannot remember his name. And
Hmm.
he did not attend Christchurch, but he was a teacher at Logos, and I had a green sweater. It was a hand-me-down. We didn't have a lot of money, and the sweater was too big for me, and it fell off my shoulder all the time. But I liked it. I liked it when it fell off my shoulder. I didn't mind that. And this teacher asked me to stay in. This was in eighth grade. He asked me to stay back after class, and he asked the other girls, to shut the door on their way out. And he asked me if I knew what a harlot was and if I knew what a whore was.
Oh.
And he said it all with this kind of like smile on his face. And I was just like frozen and really didn't understand. And he was pointing at my sweater, and he was talking about my behavior, and he started talking about Proverbs, the Proverbs woman, the seductress, that leads men to hell. And he told me that I needed to watch my path, my way, because that's how he could see me going.
Hmm. How old were you at this point?
Eighth grade.
Okay.
So I was really traumatized by that. And I didn't say anything to anyone about it. Um, when I got to the next class late, I made up some excuse. I never talked to him one on one again. He didn't work there very long, but that's a good story that kind of encapsulates like this shame and guilt that I had towards myself, that there was something wrong with me, that I was too noticeable or too um, flirtatious, that I was a dangerous person. And it made me feel guilty and ashamed. And it also made me feel rebellious. Like I hated that people kept trying to put me in that box. So my time wasn't good as I got older, because the danger factor only increases as you get older, right?
You
And
hit
so
puberty, and things start changing, and then you become more dangerous.
exactly. And this constant theme that was always just bandied around by the teachers, that women were um, dangerous until they were under a man's authority, and that they were ripe and ready, and they should get married when they're young. um, Mr. Nance was my teacher. He was my Bible teacher and my math teacher. And I remember he talked a lot about women and marriage. And he would say things. I remember once when he said he was describing the Old Testament law of being allowed to have more than one wife, and how amazing that would be.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
he wishes that we could return to the Old Testament law, but alas, we're forced to follow the New Testament law, the man of one wife, just things like that. Constant talking by the teachers, the male teachers, about us as girls and how dangerous we could be, and how important it was that we were aware of that. It was just constant. Um, and I always felt like I was doing it wrong. So I rebelled pretty hardcore when I was a freshman, and I was like, if I'm that already, then I might as well be getting something out of it, because all I do this
Hmm.
is, like it was almost that thought in my mind, like I wasn't doing anything, I was
Hmm.
just being, right? So, but
True.
nothing was happening.
That's a good
I was
point.
So I was like, I might as well do something.
Yeah, this is not fun being called this. I might as well have fun now that I'm
Yeah,
being called this.
literally, yeah. So when this boy from public school found my number, I snuck out with him. I had him over while I was babysitting. I got a hickey on my neck. I I completely rebelled. And it was a big deal for me to do those things. And it was a big deal for me as a Logos girl to be caught, because I got caught. For instance, he would intercept me at the Nazarene youth group, and he would take me out instead of me going to the youth group. So I got ratted out, by someone there. I got ratted out by the little girl I was babysitting, as well. I should. I was not being responsible, or respectful, but um, and then the axe just fell. The emphasis that was placed on my stepdad of being, the priest of his home, of being in control of his home. It was just, I could tell it was just so hard for him. He didn't know me that well, right? He'd only met me when I was, you know, in fifth grade or so, and he just didn't know what to do. So he just became very militant. um, for instance, he would have me copy off, or he copied off the behavior section of my report card, and he would have me take it to every teacher on every Friday. And if I got one negative mark, do they talk too much? Are they respectful? Right? The behavior section of the report card. If I got one negative mark, then I was grounded for the week. And interestingly, Mr. Callahan, Wes Callahan, was one of the teachers that would always give me a poor mark, so I would be grounded. And as I got older, I remember just like staying with him, and like laugh. If I could make him laugh and we could have a good conversation, and I bantered with him enough, then sometimes he would erase it so I wouldn't be grounded. But talking in class, I couldn't not talk in class. So there was just this constant feeling that something was really wrong with me. Um, and honestly, I will say that the flavor and the feeling of that church changed too. I know I mentioned, like, I vividly remember being young and being like having fun at church with Doug Wilson at the front of the church singing his songs, and it was just happy, and the whole entire church just changed. It became so somber and laced in. And I remember when he changed his preaching, he became infant baptism. That was a huge thing. We lost like some of my favorite people, elders from the church. We lost, like, our church was like cut in half, all of these, as he began to change his theology. Everything about the church changed, and it wasn't to my liking. I was like, why are we singing these songs? Why are we doing it this way? Like, it just felt so serious, very serious. So I vividly remember that changing gradually as I got older as well. So those two things were kind of as I began to not be like as happy with where I was.
Yeah. Um, so at Logos, so this is brings you to your eighth grade year, and I'm assuming a little bit into your ninth grade year
Mm-hmm.
as well. So when when you started rebelling, and say if this is what I'm going to be called, this is what I'm going to do because obviously I'm not getting any benefit out of being called this, and just this hurts and this sucks. Um, how are you being treated at Logos? How were teachers treating you? How, well, I mean, not necessarily just home life, but what was that? Because it changed. You said when you were when I mean he didn't call you a whore or a harlot, but he implied it to be
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
What was that change like, and then how did that affect you, and what was that trajectory like from there on? What happened at Logos?
So I remember vividly, somewhere in the beginning of my sophomore year, being exhausted. Like I was so tired from getting in trouble all the time. My stepfather was militant. He wouldn't let up at all, and and the teachers at Logos were behind him. He was a teacher at Logos, right? So they were all united in this effort to keep me, under control. Um, and I just remember feeling really tired. So I told myself I was going to be a good Christian, and I would get up and underline passages of the Bible, and I really wanted to be a good girl. And then something happened in my sophomore year that I think is very important and involves Jim Wilson. Um, Jim Wilson was kind to me. We didn't have therapists, but we had spiritual counseling. I needed a therapist. But Jim Wilson was often my spiritual counselor. I liked him, even though he wasn't associated with Doug Wilson's church. I can't even remember how that started, that he was my spiritual counselor, but I did trust him. And a boy that I was dating that went to another church who had been vetted by my stepfather. So I had permission to date Christians when I was 16. So I was dating this boy. And a very long story, but I discovered that he was being sexually molested by a police officer in the Pullman, Washington police force, and no one knew about it. And I was on the phone with this boy when I discovered this, and I said, I gotta go. And he said, I'm going to go on the boat with this man. And I didn't know what to do or who to turn to. I didn't trust my parents. I didn't trust anyone. So I called Jim Wilson. And Jim Wilson told me that he was coming to pick me up and to tell my parents that I was going to see him. And we drove from Moscow to Pullman, Washington. And Jim Wilson confronted the parents. He took them aside and confronted the parents and let them know what was happening to their son. And they did not believe that it was happening. He was like their best friend, um, and an elder in their church or a deacon in their church. But it came out after that he had been, sexually molesting many boys, and he was imprisoned. So um, that was really pivotal to me in my sophomore year because Jim Wilson helped me, and I also just this strong realization that I didn't trust my parents, and I didn't trust Doug Wilson. I didn't trust anyone in my church or at Logos, but I did trust him. And it just also just made me, it was very traumatic for me. And I was never, no one ever talked about it again. Like it wasn't even a thing that was brought up that this had happened to me and that had been involved in this. So that was very pivotal to me in my sophomore year. Um, So, um, I was trying really hard to be a good girl and to be what people expected me to be. Jim Nance helped me with my math homework almost every day. Um, and Tom Garfield was very kind to me, very jovial with me. It was just, especially looking back on it now, the familiarity aspect of the relationships I had with my teachers was just so completely inappropriate. The way that they would treat me and talk to me, it was not, it was just so many boundaries crossed. And really made me feel like I was accountable, like in my personal life, in the way that I conducted myself, in morality, integrity, that I was accountable to them. And they could ask me anything they wanted to, and I had to, talk to them about it. It was just very personal conversations all the time with all of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so things got my senior year is when things really started to go haywire as far as Wes Callahan goes. So he wasn't consistently my teacher all the way from 6th through 12th grade. I can't remember when I think he left for a while and then came back to Logos, but he was my teacher my senior year of high school. And he was my small class of 6 people. He was our favorite teacher. Our classes had morphed into a very um, lecture conversation style because there were only 6 of us. So we we would just go at it. He was our teacher for a couple hours of the day, and we would just talk and talk, go back and forth, and we just loved him so much. A lot of debating, a lot of rhetoric and logic and discussing great works of literature. And it was just really fun. I really respected Wes Callahan. Um, and we all did. And he just started to get more and more familiar with me. Um, but it didn't feel weird to me because I'm telling you, it just was like that with all the teachers.
Yeah,
Like,
it sounds like that's how they treated you in their relationship with you before this. So it wouldn't have been weird at all.
no, it wasn't. It
If
didn't
it
feel.
was not this, I think that would have been weird for you. But because it was this, it was
Mhm.
just the same trajectory that's already been happening.
Yeah, a lot, just constant is, personal conversations, especially like with Tom Garfield, would be one that it was constant. Um, so he just got more and more familiar with me, right? And definitely started to make comments that let me know that I was his favorite. And um, he would do things like he called my stepdad and he asked him if he could give me rides to school. He asked me to be his teacher's assistant. And then when I would go into the classroom to help him, he would just shut the door and start talking to me. And the conversations got more and more personal. The line was crossed on the day that he told me the story about his extramarital affair when he was a student at the U of I and already married. I think he was getting his master's. And he told me the details about his affair with his professor. Um, and, you know, that he would smoke pot with her. And he was just giving me all the nitty gritty details. And that was the conversation that switched that had never I had never had that happen where someone was giving me that kind of personal information about themselves. And I wanted to be mature about it and I wanted to be thoughtful about it. And one of the big reasons that I brought up that story that happened to me when I was a sophomore with that boy who was being molested is because I I almost prided myself on being able to really see people and get to know them and be a good listener and a good conversationalist. And I wanted to be that for my friend, that I was dating at the time, and that's what helped me help him figure out, and get help. And so I wanted to be that for Wes Callahan. Like I wanted to be a sounding board for him.
Hmm.
I
At
wanted,
17.
yeah, yeah, I wanted to be that because I respected him so much, and I thought I could probably do it. Like I could do a good job of that because I was a good listener and I would ask good questions. So we just our relationship just morphed into this very intimate friendship.
It
And to
also
me,
sounds like to me that earlier you had been called, not called, you've been implied some things
yeah,
about yourself and that you couldn't do anything right. And then all of a sudden this teacher now confides in you, is like, maybe I'm doing something right. Maybe I can right this ship. Um, I don't know if you knew how much you knew, whatever it was, but at least for you, it would have been like, hey, this is actually working. A relationship is actually working.
yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective I actually have never thought of. Um, yeah, I'll have to think on that. But I know is that I enjoyed it and I craved it, but I also felt very, very uncomfortable.
Yep.
And I
No, me
think,
saying that is not you, is not me implying that you enjoyed this. It
yeah,
was just that's it. It was just the opposite what you had heard before. And
yeah,
now you were
true. It's
trustworthy
true.
versus
Yeah,
being the wayward one.
no, you're right. That is true. Yeah, it was very awkward and very uncomfortable. And I just remember having these constant feelings of I'm trying really hard to keep up with this guy, this man, but I don't know how, but I'm gonna try really hard to, to be this sounding board that he obviously feels like I am. And then things just snowballed and got stranger and stranger in a very short amount of time as I neared my 18th birthday. So a series of things occurred. Um, for instance, I remember that he was talking about a dream that he had. And he said dreams can be so weird. And he was saying this to the whole class. And then he started describing verbatim what I had been doing the night before. I was writing a letter to my cousin and I was licking the envelope. And he's like, I had a dream about you, JD, and you were writing. And he goes to describe, like word for word, what I had been doing the night before. And I was like overcome with amazement that he had actually been able to have a dream about me, that of something I was doing. And I thought it was so cool. So I start exclaiming about it. I was doing that, I say to the whole class, and they all look at me and they're confused. They're like, what? And then Wes Callahan was like, what? You were doing that? I'm like, yeah, it's so crazy. I was actually doing word for word everything that you're describing. I was writing a letter, and he's like, that's crazy. Dreams can be powerful. And I'm like, we're so connected. He's like, I know, it's crazy. Um, or another time I was working at Pizza Hut and he would come in often and just grade papers and drink coffee and like watch me work. And I went out to my car very late at night one night and my car wouldn't start. And I had this little moment of panic. And then he materialized at my window and it just completely freaked me out. Roll down my window and he says, your car won't start, will it? And he said, I those boys that you were flirting with, I saw them and they messed with your car. And please pop the hood. And he fixes it within a couple of seconds. And then he grabbed my hand, my left hand sticking out of the car window, and he's like, you cannot flirt. You cannot be this way with guys. You're giving them the wrong impression. You have to be so careful with your power over men. And um he there's so many stories, countless stories of him, me finding out later that something I had been doing, he was the one who quote ratted me out. And then he would come to me later and say, you have to be careful with the way that you are around men and boys because you give them the wrong impression. So I just had this feeling like I was dangerous. I was a very dangerous person and I didn't quite know what to do about it except to keep trying to not be that way. Um, let's see. What are some, there's so many stories. Um, I think that the day of my high school graduation party, it was kind of like an 18th birthday slash graduation party. And I remember being so happy that day. And I was so excited. Mr. Callahan came to the party and I grabbed his hand and I pulled him over to my mom. And I just started like, you don't understand, Mom, how connected I am to this teacher. I just want to say to him in front of you what an amazing teacher he is. And you know what? He has dreams about me. And I go on to describe word for word the dream he'd had about me. And my mom's eyes went towards the back of the house outside the back window. And I saw the line of trees. And I knew, like in that second in my body, that he was what had been watching me through the windows. I had noticed myself when I'd be outside, we didn't have coverings on the windows. It's like you can see right in. And I just knew that he was watching me. And he just looked really uncomfortable. And my mom looked really uncomfortable. And I felt really uncomfortable. And I didn't know what to do about it. So we didn't say anything. He just left. And my mom didn't say anything to me. And I didn't say anything. I was just feeling more and more uneasy in my body with everything that was happening. And let's see, once we were at a movie watching Princess Bride, because honestly, Princess Bride is one of the only movies we could watch at Logos because it was appropriate enough to watch and it was smart enough to watch.
Okay. Yep.
Like it's witty, it's a witty movie. So it was like of the right caliber. I had that movie memorized. So we were watching The Princess Bride yet again, and I can't even remember whose house we were at, but he came to the party and he was sitting on the floor in front of me, and he kept reaching his hand back and just rubbing my leg. Um, and then it was time for the play, the last play of my high school career. And I don't know how this was decided, but somehow Tom Garfield and Wes Callahan thought it would be a good idea for him to play my opposite as my love interest. And this play, our Miss Brooks is the name of the play. It's an older play. It's not like there's kissing or anything, but there's hand holding and there's a lot of gazing into one another's eyes and affirmations of love and declarations of love. And he just made me feel so uncomfortable. Um, I didn't know what to do, how to handle it. The last production, especially when he was crying, like I could see tears running down his face in the lights of the stage lights. So I was just, suffice it to say, getting more and more uncomfortable and uneasy and not really knowing what to do about it. And then we had our end of the school year trip, and we were going to go to Seattle as a class. And a girl from my class was spending the night, and I got a call from him. My mom said, it's Mr. Callahan for you. And he says to me, and my mom's watching me as he's talking to me, and he says, I want you to know that I'm bringing my motorcycle on this trip. And the reason I'm bringing it is so that you can ride behind me, so I can feel your body behind me. And I'm going to have to give everybody a turn, but I'm bringing it for you. So I'm going to have you with me as much as I can. And then he said, there are certain qualities that make a woman the best woman in the world. And you embody every single one of those qualities. You would be my list, something along those lines. I'm not saying it verbatim. And I'm on the phone and I'm listening and I'm confused and I'm looking at my mom. I almost felt like she had to be able to hear what he was saying to me, even though I knew she couldn't, like logically. And I hung up the phone and I feel this mixture of pride and also like terror and like confusion. And I walk into my room and I tell this girl that's spending the night, and I remember looking at her and we just didn't say anything. There was so much of not saying anything. No, no one would talk. We girls didn't talk to each other about the things that were happening around us. You know what I mean? Like we weren't talking about that.
You were trained not to. I
Yeah,
think that's,
yeah,
it's not just you weren't, yeah, if you're dangerous, why would you talk to anybody else about what's happening?
yeah, never. We never did. We never said words like that. It's just, it's just,
Because it's not anybody else's fault but yours if you're the one who's causing all these men to do the things that they're doing.
exactly. And the whole emphasis on not being able to trust the way that you feel. I mean, that is like pervasive throughout that culture. Do not trust your feelings. Your feelings are nothing. They're you've got to follow facts, and the facts have to be based on faith, period. Feelings are last, and they have to fall in line behind faith and facts. Um, so so we took the class trip, and I just got more and more uncomfortable. I could see the other people in my class, although we weren't saying anything, they were looking at me and they knew what was happening. And I knew that they knew. And it just made me feel so dirty and so apart from them. And I already felt that way anyway. I felt apart from everyone, didn't have a lot of really good friends, and I didn't want to feel apart. So I didn't want them to be his favorite like that anymore. And I thought, well, I'm thinking about we're done with school. I'm graduated. We can just be friends now. And we don't have to, I don't have to be his special or his favorite one. This line has been crossed. He's touching my body now. He's grabbing me. He's saying things to me that are intimate that you only say to someone that you're interested in marrying or having sex with. And I don't want that relationship with him because my friendship with him is too important. So I remember feeling all of this. And on the back of the motorcycle on one of our little trips and meanderings in Seattle, I think we were coming back from the Pike Street Market. I said at a stop sign, through the helmet, I liked it better when we were friends. And he said, what? And I said, I liked it better when we were friends. And he said, I understand. And then that night he left, and we still had another day or so of our trip. And the chaperone said no explanation. She just said he's gone, and he had a family emergency or something like that. And I knew in my body that it was because of what I'd said, but I had a handy little coping mechanism of dissociating that I'd been using since childhood, where I would literally float up to the ceiling and or the sky, and I'd watch myself living my life. So I did that really fast because I just knew it was something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So time to float up. But when I got home, it wasn't very long before my stepfather pulled me into the trailer where we lived and just started berating me. And again, those words were coming out that I'd heard since I was in eighth grade: whore and harlot, seductress, all of those words. And talk about dissociating. I felt like frozen, like a rabbit, like just frozen. Like if I just freeze and I pretend like this isn't happening, maybe it's not happening. So the words were just kind of washing over me. And I was just so confused. I'm like, what did he say? Um, but I knew that I believed in Mr. Callahan. I believed that he had gone and he must have told my stepfather the truth. And therefore, I really am such a whore because I don't know, what he said, but I know he said the truth. And so I am judge, jury. I've been tried. I'm guilty. I did something really, really bad. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I've done something bad. And I believed that. No one asked me what had actually happened. No one asked me. And I want to insert and say now that my stepfather has apologized to me for that. And he has asked for my forgiveness for not asking me on that day what had happened. And that's important to say.
Hmm.
Um, then I got called into Doug Wilson's office, and he was just really kind to me. Um, Very father figure, smiled a lot. He said, I remember vividly a couple of phrases coming out of his mouth. One was that he knew that I would, quote, always have trouble with boys, and so he was glad that this had happened under his watch. Um, and maybe he didn't say he, maybe he said our watch, like collective. Um, and then he told me that I was no mud fence. And I just remember those words very vividly. They've stayed with me my whole life. Well, I'm no mud fence, because at that time, this image of this white picket fence kind of came up into my mind. I'm like, well, that's good. At least I'm not ugly, right?
Hmm.
But I got to be careful with this power, because I'm dangerous, and I'm not a mud fence. So, people are going to be attracted to me. And then the next day I had to see Wes Callahan at church. And I said to him, I, I ran into him coming out of the bathrooms, and I was just like, are we still friends? And he said, no, we can't be friends anymore. And I was just really confused, because no one had asked me what had happened. And I really believed that he had told the whole truth. And in that quote truth, I believed that he had said what he had done, and that he had started it. And I even believed that he had told the truth about, watching me from the backyard. I believed that he had told the truth, that he had let me know about his extramarital affair, and like confided that in me. And I believed that he had done all of those things, and that yet I was the one that was to blame.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And I think you made the comments earlier. Your story, if people have listened to part two on the groom to submit with Emily, your story is has a striking resemblance to hers with Jim Nance. Yours is just with Wes Callahan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, Emily may know this, but if she doesn't and she's listening, it's her being brave about her story that really let me know that I had to tell my story, because the exact same thing was happening to her. And she is the age of my oldest daughter.
Hmm.
And I was crushed by that resemblance as I heard her story, and I couldn't even fathom it. I couldn't believe how similar it was. And it broke me. It broke something in me for sure. Um, because my sister, Callie, had been asking me to be a part of, for instance, getting Tom Garfield fired
Hmm.
because of his inappropriate relationships with students. And I just I wouldn't and couldn't at that time say all of my words, because I had pushed it down so deeply. Um, so yeah, very, very similar.
Yeah.
Um, Happening in 1992, 1993.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So this has been happening for decades
Yeah.
in these. This is not just an isolated oopsie from one teacher. It seems like this is a little bit more of a pattern than it is an accident.
Yeah. Yeah. And the handling of it. And even even more importantly for the victims, the aftermath of how that affects us.
Yep.
And the there are some very concrete choices that I made because of what had happened to me. For instance, getting married at all barely knowing the man that I married, getting married at barely 19. I'd been 19 for 2 months when I got married to someone I didn't really know, because that human being, I brought him in to see Doug Wilson, and he became a Christian, and he was kind to me. And I knew that I would never be able to get out from under the authority of my stepfather until I was married.
Hmm.
And I knew that, I tried to shake my ex-husband off my trail by telling him this story. Like, you don't want me. I'm damaged goods. Here's what I did. And I told him word for word what had happened with Wes Callahan.
Mhm.
And he was like, that wasn't your fault. And I was like, what? And then at the same time, my sister, Mary, I had told her the details, and she had gone to a family in Jim Wilson's church. She had gone to her friend, and that friend went to her parents who were in Jim Wilson's church. And Jim Wilson, yet again, so many years later, calls me to come over to the house where these people were. And he asks me, he's the first person who ever asked me what happened. And I told him what happened. And he called Doug Wilson
Hmm.
that minute, while I was at his house. And Doug came, and they went into this back room and talked for a bit. And when Doug came out of the room and left the house, he looked at me. He didn't say a word. Um, I don't know what he was thinking, but I know what it felt like. Just naked rage, just directed at me, because I knew that his father was calling him out, and then it all came out. So then I was asked to tell my story again to Tom Garfield. And then he was repositioned, not let go. And I remember Tom Garfield, when I told the story, he said, why didn't you say, because this is many months after it happened, right?
Mhm.
Just many months. And he said, why didn't you say any of this when this happened? You didn't say anything like this. And I said, because no one asked me. And I thought the whole story had been told. And he said, no, that's not the version we were told, but it's really sad that such a godly man and such an excellent teacher can't teach here anymore because of this. Um, so all of the fallout of that and trying to grapple with that is a huge part of the reason I got married so young, because I was just trying to find a safe place to land, and I thought I had better chances with this man I barely knew versus my stepfather, who really, believed at this point that I was a harlot headed for hell. So I might as well, get married, do what they want, start having children, show them that I can be, a verdant woman that's using her body the way that God intended a woman to use her body, which is to make children and a home and be, a sexual partner for her husband. That's I'll do it. Fine. Done. Let's get married. So that aftermath is huge, and it defined the next 20 years of my life. Started having babies, um, raising them the way that, I felt I was supposed to, always following Doug Wilson, his books, listening to his sermons. um, it defined 20 years of my life.
So you got out after years and years and years and years, you got out. So if you can talk to the women who are listening, because last we checked, it's about 65-35 women, men who are listening to this. So it's majority women who are listening to this, which is what we expected, given the topic that we're discussing. Can you talk to two groups of women? One being those who are like you in your situation, in their teens, who are either in Doug's church or in a CREC church or in a church that's like one to those, who maybe they didn't have the words, and now they're listening to this is like, this is exactly what happened to me, or this is similar. to what happened to me. I've just never heard it before. So if you can talk to them first about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and then if you can talk to those who are um, who would be interested in this and interested in what you said, the traditional, and not to say that traditionalism is bad. It's just if it's forced upon you, then that's where we draw the line. It's if you want the traditional family, absolutely go for it. If not, then that's your choice as well. So if you can talk to both groups, those who are currently experiencing this and trying to figure out what do I do, like what do I make of this? Can I even talk to anybody? Is this just me? And then those who are interested in one of these kinds of communities, whether it's being forced on them if they're part of a family and their father or mother chooses this for them, or if it's them that they want some solidity in their lives and they feel like they don't have it, and this is at least one of those options available. So if you can talk to those two groups.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because as you're asking me that, it's almost the same words for both groups. And those words have to do with taking the time to get to know yourself and your own feelings, that they are valid, that when you feel uncomfortable in your body, it's your body telling you that it's not safe, and that it's possible, especially for some personalities like mine, to bypass what the body's saying and go into the head and convince yourself that you have to just keep moving forward, and you have to follow the script, and you just have to keep swimming. Energizer bunny, just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. And when it feels wrong in your body, you just ask forgiveness from God and keep going and keep going. And that's how I spent a lot of my life. Anytime I felt uncomfortable or unsafe, I would chalk it up as a sin, ask for forgiveness, and keep going. So when you are feeling uncomfortable or unsafe, don't keep going. Stop and ask yourself why, and do what you need to do to get space and time to sit with yourself, or to find someone that you trust to talk to, that's preferably outside the church,
Mhm.
uh, one of those communities, because a lot of my safe people, like Jim Wilson, and I don't, I loved Jim Wilson very much, but his words never stopped being to me that I just needed to not be bitter. He gave me that bitterness book like how many times I can't remember. Like he was kind to me and he was safe for me, but he was also a huge part of the problem, because when I was feeling unsafe, he would say, just be okay. When I was feeling depressed, just don't be bitter, right? So you have to get a variety of perspectives is the really important thing. Like, you need a variety of perspectives. Don't stick with just the perspective of this community that you're being raised in or being educated in. If it doesn't feel comfortable or safe in your body, ask questions. Um, that's the word. Like,
All right.
your feelings are valid, they matter. Ask questions, get different perspectives, open your eyes to other perspectives.
All right. And then open the floor. This is not a question from me for you to answer. This is anything that you want to leave listeners with. Any final thoughts, any parting thoughts, anything that Jade wants people to come away from this conversation with, any wise words, anything at all. The floor is open for you.
These last several months, about 6 months, I have been really fighting to find the balance between not being defined by the things that happen to me, as I'm getting more and more vulnerable about speaking about them instead of hiding them away or pushing them down. I don't want to be defined. I don't want to define myself as a victim. And yet I have to leave room and space for all of those feelings that are very uncomfortable as I become more vulnerable. So I think that my words would just be one of compassion for the other women, especially, not just women, but but people who have been spiritually abused this way, it's a special kind of abuse that really takes a long time to decipher and untangle and unravel. And so be patient with yourself. And for me, I think writing, I wrote a memoir, wrote it down as a book, and I decided to take a very honest look and write it from the perspective of every age that I was at the time. And that gave me a lot of grace and compassion for myself as I finished the book and allowed me to kind of sit back and and recognize that um, I deserve I deserve love and compassion, and so does every other person who has been a victim of this special kind of spiritual abuse. And let's just keep finding the balance together, the balance between calling out what happened to us and using our words and knowing that we were victimized, and also knowing that there's a way forward and through and out, and we can keep growing and thriving and healing. It's a process, and the more that we talk about it, the better for everyone else. So I appreciate this opportunity to say my words and continue my own healing process. And I hope that it helps anyone else. And I'm here to talk to anyone about it too, if they want to reach out to me, because um, it took me a long time to get comfortable with that space. And now that I'm comfortable in that space, I want to use it as much as I can. So those are my words.
Moving from Jade's experience at Logos under Tom Garfield, Wes Callahan, Jim Nance, and Doug Wilson, among a few others, we go to the anonymous man and the church he never quite fit in with, and they let him know. Here's his story in full.
All right, yeah. So, was in Moscow. Um, got married. Had we had our first child. Um, but then the housing market crashed in 2008. Um, and the job that I had disappeared. Um, and I decided to go back to school at the local University of Idaho to get an accounting degree. Just because it was supposed to be a recession-proof kind of job was the logic. And if accountants can't find work, then nobody can't find work. Well, it turned out nobody can find work during that period. So I got the degree, but 2010, there's nothing. Moscow's small. There's not a lot of jobs there. And I'm interviewing all over the place, but I'm competing against uh, highly experienced accountants for entry level jobs. So we decide to head out to another CREC church that is in a bigger, more metropolitan area where we might have better shot at finding some work, have some more connections, some more support. Um, we didn't really have, well, it's some family in Moscow, but there's just no jobs. So we moved for jobs, but we were there for a year and still, I'm interviewing left and right. And I read resumes are great. I always got in the door. I kept getting interviews. I would get second rounds, third rounds, and I would keep losing these jobs to people who, sorry, we had this guy with 5 years of experience. We had to give him the job. And I kept hearing that over and over again. And then um, my mother-in-law, who was at another CREC church several hours away, um, talked to one of the deacons of her church, who was a partner in a small accounting firm. I said, "Hey, my son-in-law, he's got an accounting degree. He's looking for work. Are you guys hiring?" And he said, to have him reach out to me. So I did. Went out there for an interview, and ended up getting the job. And so we move out there. It's several hours away. To multiple. I had multiple moves during this period, but we I needed something. Finally, we have a lead. Here's a job, and so we go.
And we were really excited about this opportunity. I had known this pastor my entire life. My mom and his wife have been friends since elementary school. So this was really a lifelong relationship for me. So we were excited not just about finally having work, but about the church
Hmm.
and about the community we were going
There's a
into.
connection there.
There was a
Um,
connection there,
yeah.
and it had been a really hard year. And so we were just, we just finally thought, this is it, God has given us something good.
Yeah. And at first, it was great. So we got there. So the timelines, this whole thing happens over the course of like a year and a half or less. We got there in October,
Mhm.
tax season. So mainly, this is from mostly it does taxes and then it does some other stuff, but the rest of the year gets lighter. But tax season starts in January. So first, though, I'm not doing taxes. I'm just, they have me doing, with my accounting degree, and I learned and just other past experience. I was really good with Excel and Word and stuff, and I was able to do a lot of streamlining a lot of their processes. Like, oh, you could do this a lot easier if you do this and that, and they really appreciated that, and they were doing a lot of stuff, just the hard way on paper, and I was able to automate some things, and they appreciated it so much that the managing partner actually gave me a raise, just a couple months later, like a big raise, um, which was amazing. And so now it's like, getting toward Christmas, and we're feeling pretty good, and everything's great. Um, but then a couple things happen. One, tax season starts in January, which is rough because, contrary to popular belief, most accounting programs do not teach you how to do taxes. You're just expected to get that training on the job, um, which didn't happen. But the other, um, is that the partner who hired me, the deacon, from my mother-in-law's church that we were now members of, um, left the firm. And so, uh, the next, he was bought out by basically the number one accountant under beneath the partners. Um, and she was actually this partner. I'm just going to call her the partner. Um, she was present at my interview before,
And is also a member of the
and
church.
she's a member of the church. Yeah, that's important. She's a member of the church. Has been for a long
Oh,
time,
wow,
I guess.
yeah.
Long before we got years, probably. Um, so, well established there. Um, but she'd been present in my interview, and I could tell that she didn't like me even at the interview. Like, she was not rooting for me. She was trying to shoot me down, but she didn't have any say in it. She wasn't a partner. All the others apparently thought I was great. So I got in anyway. But now she's a partner, and she hasn't forgotten. So I had to give some background here because the nature of her relationship to the church and to the firm, to the community, really ends up being the crux of a lot of what happens here. Um, so she and her husband were, a lot of business interests and a lot of money. There's some of the wealthier people in the area, in the community, but they did not have a good reputation in the community, for business dealings, and for just not being nice people. Um, so
And the relationship in the church was, once they even went to drop something off at the pastor's house or something, and was once we were well in the thick of things, talking with the pastor's wife, and she actually said, we don't know why they're at the church, but we're just really glad they are. And it was just this bewilderment of like, we don't know why they're there, but we're glad. We're just so glad that they're there. So there was definitely this sense of we don't know why they're here, but we want to keep them here.
But at this point in time, while we're there, we don't know this really yet. We don't have. I know that she's just not very nice at work, but we're not quite, aware of just how bad it is, how much everybody else knows how bad it is, but nobody says anything. So tax season's going. No training, so I'm just thrown into the deep end. It's rough. Billable hours. Every you have to track all of your time, and time is literally money, and it is her money. she's in charge of all the associates. So um, I report directly to her, but when I can't do something fast enough, she's feeling the pennies going out of her pocket. So the pressure was huge, and I knew I squeaked through, but I knew it. She's not pleased at all. Just really does not have that patience to train. She just wants to start making the money now, and she's not because I'm a drain. But I got through. So tax season's over in April. Everybody takes a break, and now we go into this period where the other thing that this firm would do, they would do a lot of like governmental audits, but that doesn't start till the summer. So you got this little bit of a gap. And so we're doing some special projects, and I have a bookkeeping client, and I'm good at research, and so they would give me research projects. They're still the other partners. They're trying to find a niche for me. They're trying to find stuff that I can do. And okay, he can do research, so they give me like, here's this new tax program that nobody knows about. Research it, find out how this works, and they give me a case, a client who wants to take advantage of the particular project. And the nature of this project, I'll go over it briefly, but it's what really sets things off, and eventually gets the church involved here. So it was an incentive program. It's like an alternative energy thing where you've got land, and if you could set up some alternative energy source, you get a big tax refund as an incentive for doing it. And I having to research where all the rules and everything, and I have all of this person's receipts, and I'm going through, have to fill out all the forms and checking all the boxes, and I see that this client, who's a big landowner in the area, client that is very important to the firm, I see that he does not qualify for this incentive program, and it's black and white. It's black and white. It's not me not knowing what I'm doing. It's on paper. It's black and white. He doesn't qualify. And so I go to managing partner with the bad news, fully expecting him to go, "Oh, that's too bad. All right, I'll have to let him know." Instead, I kind of get this, okay, I'll look into it. Uh, and it's the next day, I believe. It's a pretty quick turnaround. This partner tells me everything's fine. He qualifies. No, it's good. Don't worry about it. And that's the end of the discussion with them.
Well, and you were told to actually push it through.
Yeah, well, yeah, just do it. It's done. Go ahead and because I was at the point of like submission. I had all the ducks were in a row. But he told me to just go ahead and push the button on it. Even though I knew this guy does not qualify, this is tax fraud. This is flat out defrauding the federal government, tax fraud for, like, I want to say it was tens of thousands of dollars. This isn't like a couple $1,000s. This is more like it was like a 20,000. It was big. It was, there were enough zeros. I mean, it's not a Ponzi scheme level, but it was not small change. Um, but I'm told to just, it's done, um, and walk away from it. Makes me very uncomfortable. I don't like it. That's not how I do things. I don't want to say, well, I don't believe I don't know. It was black and white. Uh, and, but an accountant has the responsibility to do stuff right, with the IRS and with the clients. Um, and so I end up going to our pastor for advice, the one that has the relationship already, that because uh, I didn't want to go before unbelievers. I was almost like, oh, I finally get to do this. You read about it in the Bible and you hear about it, and now I'm doing it. And I was proud of myself for this. I'm going to my pastor. I'm going to sort this out and ask his advice. What should I do here? So uh, I have a sit down with him, and I tell him what's going on. And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll go talk to the partner who was the deacon, who used to be a partner in the firm, one who left." which made sense to me. It's like, okay, good. He's a deacon in your church. He's qualified. He's going to know what's going on. He knows the firm. So I'm waiting to hear back on, how should we approach this? Um, and uh, about a week later,
Yeah.
I think, the pastor got back to us and told us, well, he says that uh, tax has a lot of gray areas, and don't worry about it. So I had an end of discussion with the firm. Now I've got an end of discussion with my pastor. My pastor is also telling me walk away from this. That when that happened, combined with how miserable the tax season was, and clearly I'm not being supported here. The person that's in charge of the new hires is not training and didn't like me to begin with. And now this, I wanted out. And that was a big decision because one, we fought long and hard for this job. And two, they wanted a commitment. They wanted you to stay there for a certain amount of time. And we told them we would. We were willing to do that. This wasn't never going to be I'm gonna do, a year and get out. This was gonna be a longer term thing. But now it's like this isn't gonna work. And so I start looking on the sly. Because still I don't want to lose this job. I can't. I don't want to start over again. But the market is still really bad. So we're in 2012 now, and the job market is still not great. And the location, we had to go, drive several hours away to get out here, and so we're away from some of the other areas where there are other jobs, and people aren't hiring you unless you're local. And so I just wasn't finding anything. I had some interviews, but nothing was really clicking. Um, in the meantime, I'm still trying to keep my head down and just do my job and stick it out. It's around this time that I discovered the gossip system. So this firm had this internal messaging system that they would use, instead of using Skype or Microsoft Teams or something. They had this really archaic old software system. But the thing about it was available to everyone because they wanted you to be able to go back and reference it. Like, okay, well, we talked about, doing X and Y for this particular case. And so they wanted you to be able to look at it. And so, we would go back in and reference stuff. And I'm doing this as I'm supposed to. And I run across several instances of the partners, particularly the partner, the one who's my immediate boss,
At our church.
and goes to our church, doing a lot of really hostile, what you described as mean girl gossip. And as soon as she said that, I was like, yeah, that's what it is. It was mean girl gossip about everybody, like everybody. Everybody was a target. And more importantly, there was gossip about my wife. And then so she's following her online and watching her in church, and like what and then turning around and gossiping about this stuff to other partners in the firm who don't go to our church. And that was super concerning. Like, she's saying all this stuff and stuff's not true. And that combined with what happened with that tax project, I go back. No, wait. Okay, so no, so I discovered all of that, and it's actually not long after that now in October. So we went through some audit stuff, and I'm still just trying to get through and keep my head down. So in mid-October, the partner comes to me and says, "You need to find a new job by the end of the year." So they're giving me to the end of the year. So I already know pastors must probably involved at this point. I know, or just because she's in the church and I'm in the church, because she would have to say something. Why? I, I think they're just hoping that we just move on. Uh, so I'm trying, but then not long after that, so we're still in October. She then comes back and says, "No, we want you out by the end of this month." So then I go to the pastor because now they're telling me two different things, and I go back to the pastor and because this ends up going a lot back and forth. We want you gone by the end of the year. Okay, we want you gone this month. Okay, we want you gone. And like at one point they said like in a couple of months, or they kept
Yeah.
moving it
And the
around.
gossip is
And
just
yeah, and the
continuing.
gossip is still churning. And it's like the worse it gets for us, the more the gossip piles on, where they're um just accusing us of being uh, I was called an Eeyore at one point, and we're just not friendly or not quiet. I don't, well, we're under siege on multiple fronts and all this stress, and they're just going after us behind our backs. And so, I go to the pastor and I say, "Hey, all this stuff is happening. They keep reneging and changing the terms. They told me I had to the end of the year, and she just told me now I only have to the end of the month. Um, and
And
uh,
this isn't how Christians in the workplace should behave.
yeah,
And how do we respond to this rightly?
that's what makes it so
You
hard.
know?
Is I'm shocked. I'm reeling. It's like this isn't how it's supposed to go. I went to the pastor. We're working as brothers and sisters in Christ in the church, and yet, and this is a Christian employer, and the other partners were Christians too. They just went to different church. So it's like this is a Christian environment here, and yet I feel like I'm being gaslighted, and um and at one point we were encouraged to buy a house in the area because I asked, is this job solid enough? Should we buy a house because we were staying somewhere else? And she said, yeah, even though she must have known by then that she wanted me out. So they were going to let us settle in and buy a house and then get rid of me. So uh, the pastor uh, got them to go back to doing the end of the year thing.
Which we did appreciate.
And we did appreciate that. Yeah, he got them to do that because they weren't till he did it. So we told them about this. This is they got super hostile work environment. There's all this gossip going on. Here's all the stuff that's happening. Help us, please. So he gets them to go back to the original deal. Back to the end of the year.
He starts preaching sermons about submitting to your earthly authorities, namely employers. And there's no way this isn't about us. It's just no way it isn't. And, you know, I know people have to think, well, how can you expect your pastor to intervene in your employment situation? And it's not like we expected the pastor to save a job, you know? But there's this authority structure you're always taught, right? You have God and you have civil government, and then you have your mid-level structures like your employer. And so when you're asked by your employer to violate the law, the civil government, and you're left reeling and you don't know what to do, and then you go to who you think represents God, your church, to find out how do we handle this. And God, the church, basically says, forget it, we're wiping out one level of the hierarchy, and you're just got to go with the mid level. And now you have the cognitive dissonance of God is telling me for I don't know what reason, because I can't find it scripturally, to violate the law because my employer tells me to violate the law. And furthermore, my employer is decimating my character and that of my family, not only in the workplace, but at the church. And it's really hard to communicate how difficult, how difficult it was. I mean, he was blacking out.
No, I was gonna say that's how difficult it was.
Yeah.
I would like wake wake up in the middle of the night and like cold sweat and my ears are ringing, and then I would just kind of gray out and start to black out. And it started happening 2 or 3 times a week to the point where I went to the hospital. Like, what's wrong? Am I having a reaction to something? Don't know. Well, it was the stress of desperately trying to get out, but we can't because just not finding other work, but also still trying to keep this job as long as possible because we need the money.
And trying to please
And
both the employer and the church and not violate the law.
and not
These
violate
are
the
all,
law. It's all connected. Yeah,
yeah,
it's all tangled up. And so yeah, I'm blacking out on a regular basis, just out. Which gets me into further trouble because I come in late for work sometimes and I get chewed out for that. So the pastor had us meet, had a sit down with the partner and another elder. Um, and this was kind of the object was to have us all apologize to each other and forgive so that we could move on. So he made us apologize. Um, and but it was the apology of the partner says, I'm sorry this is hard for you.
not I'm
Um,
sorry that we've been
like
asked to violate the law. Not I'm sorry I've been gossiping about you behind your back. I'm sorry this is hard for you. So there's no real apology for what's been done. Um, and we're not even sure what he's supposed to apologize for. But I'm sorry is said. But then she turns around and says to me, and this comes straight off of your Facebook, well, this sucks. You're just not supportive of his career. And I was left reeling, crying, and reeling. And the pastor turns to me and says, you need to apologize for that. And I said, but I never said that. We need this. I am supportive of his career, and I never said it. And I said, you can go through my Facebook page, you can take it apart, and I promise you, it is not there. And he said, no, he wasn't going to do that. He didn't want to look for the evidence, but I needed to apologize for it. So I apologized for it. Afterwards, I went home and I raked through my Facebook page. And the only thing I found was during tax season, he was given an unexpected Saturday off. And I said, I was so thankful for the unexpected day as a family and how much I enjoyed having my husband home. That was it.
you had
That
me look
was
at it too,
all
just to
I
double
could
check,
find. Yeah.
and that was it. That was it. But they didn't like it.
But I had to apologize for saying this sucks and being unsupportive of his career. Shortly after that, the deacon's wife, whom I really, really did love, she was a wonderful person, asked how I was doing after church. I was not doing well. I wasn't. And I more or less lost it. And cried, well, loudly stating that I was not okay, was not doing well, and that apparently cheating on taxes is a gray area, which was from her husband. Um, and that we're in sin for not wanting to be involved in it or in any of the rumor mill that's going on at the firm. Um, and that was it. She didn't have a whole lot to say, but I was not super quiet, and so it was overheard by others in the church. And so now I have an outburst that needs to be dealt with. And the pastor comes over to our house to confront us about it, to talk to us about it. Um, I tearfully asked him essentially why we were getting railroaded. You know, why was this happening when what all we wanted to do was the right thing? That's not to say we handled everything 100% correctly, but we didn't want to violate the law. We didn't want to participate in this rumor mill that was set up. And we were getting run over. The sermons were being preached. We heard that the men's meetings were also about submitting to your earthly authorities. And we didn't understand. I didn't understand what was happening here. And he very loudly says, I don't have to explain my ministry to you. And then he stands up and starts yelling that once you've decided something, that's the way it is. There's no telling you otherwise. You have always been this way. And that's just the way you are. At this point he's standing and he's yelling at me. And I'm not a particularly bold person, but I stood up and I told him he needed to leave my home. He didn't. No, he refused. He did sit down and stop yelling. But I tearfully for years would ask people that I knew if this was who I was. If this is who I was, I needed to change. Because I did not want to be that person. But someone who I loved and cared for deeply had accused me of being during a really dark period of our lives. Yeah, it was hard. So shortly after that, we stopped attending the church.
Yeah, we tried another one. And we're not having a crisis of faith, we're having a crisis of church at this point. Like what still reeling, what's happening? Why did this happen? This isn't supposed to happen. But we still need something. So we try another church in the area. Day one, we go in there, and after the service, everybody's having coffee and stuff, and the pastor approaches us, and he already knows who we are, and is aware that we are troubled, that we have some stuff going on. And I'm thinking, how does he know this? We've never actually met him before. We had no contact with him. We didn't know him. He didn't know us, but he knew stuff about us. And I figured he could only have learned this from the CREC pastor. And so I sent him an email and asked him that. Did you tell him about us? Why are you telling other pastors about us? And he responded, and his exact words were professional courtesy. It was a professional courtesy that he notified other pastors that, hey, these problem people are coming your way. So we had nowhere to go now, and we basically just have to stop going to church altogether. So we're just like right before Christmas, we're not going to church at all now because we can't, because this one pastor has poisoned all the wells, all of them. There's nowhere to go. Um, and then maybe 2, 3 weeks later, January, the partner comes. I'm still there. I'm still trying to just stay there as long as I can because I'm still looking for work. We need as many paychecks to come in as possible. We're socking away what we can. But she finally comes in and says, "This is the day, and this is the last day." So that's it. I pack up and I'm out. And now just full time, still job hunting. Um, and we kind of have this period where, okay, we're out, and we got out from the church. No, we don't have another one yet. but just being out and now the job is out, I gotta admit there was some relief there.
Mhm.
There was. I mean, it's not great. We're, stuck here without work. There's no other work in this area. There's no churches to go to, and yet at least, we don't have them over us now. Or so we thought. They weren't done. In February, we got a letter from the elders, basically urging us to, repent. Come back, repent. Let's do the forgiveness thing. The question was, though, is repent of what? That question is still there. What did we do that you think we need to repent of? And so, and it was clear that they were not listening to us. They weren't looking at any, they did not, they knew all about this partner and the other partner and everything else, and they were clearly on that side.
And they also knew because there had been another member of the church who had worked in the firm for several years. And, I had talked to her, and she was someone who remained in contact with me. And she had said, I felt like I was just biding my time there until I had a family. But so I never said anything when I should have. But it is this bad. It has always been this bad. And she actually tried to intervene on our behalf with the church, and she was told to stop encouraging us in our sin. So we did have at least the one advocate, somebody who knew what it was like where we were, and she was shut down hard and fast too. Um, but we did appreciate her efforts.
And so at this point, they're still kind of hounding us. They're not like knocking on our door, but they're sending us emails and still trying. They're just not leaving us alone. And at this point, we just want to be left alone. So I write a letter back. And it's the last contact that we had with the CREC. I'd like to read a part of it if I can. I've redacted some of the identifying stuff, but I want to read it because it is the very last contact we had with the CREC, and it just states some of the crux of it in a way that I recently rediscovered this in my files, and yeah. So I'm just gonna start in the middle of this, but it really gets to the heart of it. Here's what we believe to be the crux of the matter. Since the elders do not wish to acknowledge the long and ongoing mistreatment of employees at the firm, particularly the partner, despite uh, despite the evidence I've tried time and again to present, continuing to attend the church would be to unnecessarily subject ourselves to abuse. To put it simply, the elders believe no wrongdoing is taking place, and we are tired of being slapped in the face by the elders and the partner. We have turned the other cheek to no end, and we will continue to do so. But if staying away from the church will take us out of striking range, who can blame us? However, as much grief as we have received from the pastor, we have received, or from the partner, excuse me, we have received more from the pastor. As he put it during one of the last times I spoke with him face to face, I believe that you believe these things are happening. It was then I knew that nothing I could ever say in the matter would make a difference. I was, in his eyes, a bitter soul, and a man who is bitter is to be pitied but not trusted. Bitterness is a broad and powerful term. When someone is labeled as bitter, every word spoken and action performed by that person is scrutinized and doubted. No real evidence is required to condemn a bitter person because no matter how much truth may fall from his lips, all that need be said is, I wouldn't listen to him. He's a very bitter person. It is a stigma that is almost impossible to shake once applied, and it becomes a powerful weapon in the hands of those who have dealings with the person in question. It became such a weapon in the hands of the partner, a weapon handed to her in an email from the pastor. Throughout our dealings with the pastor regarding our current troubles, he always, I mean, this is addressed to all of the elders, by the way. So he always refrained from discussing his work or communications with the partner. The pastor has always believed that we must deal with our own sins and leave the partner to him. In general, that is a wise course of action. However, the reverse has not held true. While the pastor refused to discuss the partner's character with me, he did not offer me the same courtesy. Not only did the pastor describe me as bitter in an email to the partner, but he also discussed our reasons for leaving the church, the nature of his meetings with me, and which church we were currently attending. Toward the end of my employment with the firm, I was told I was being let go because the firm had overhired, and I was given a positive letter of recommendation. Yet the partner's messages told another story entirely. In fact, when the employment department called her in particular to verify my status, she told them I had been fired as opposed to being laid off, but could give no reasons as to why. Fortunately, the employment department determined I had been discharged without cause, and I am now receiving unemployment payments. All of this to say that that the partner has been saying one thing and doing another since our troubles began. Most grievous has been her treatment of my wife in our meeting in mid-October. The partner vehemently denied bad mouthing my wife behind her back, and yet in the attached memo, you'll find yet another example of her spreading gossip about my wife that is completely untrue. This is by far the worst thing the partner has done to us, far worse than taking away my job. But the greatest wound we have received in this regard came not from the partner, but from the elders, when they assumed the partner's words were true, despite the evidence speaking to the contrary, despite her reputation in the community, and despite the lifelong relationship the pastor has had with my wife. With the elders considering us guilty of bitterness, with the congregation knowing only of my wife's outburst and not the reasons behind it, and with the partner keeping close track of our church attendance for her own ends, the Sabbath ceased to be a day of rest for us. Those are the reasons we have left the church. Since the elders refused to recognize the partner's duplicity, and because of the powerful stigma of bitterness that has been attached to us, we have no more desire to pursue the matter. We wish simply to be left alone. We do not sit in our house stewing in our own bitterness. In fact, we do not think much about these issues anymore unless pressed to do so. We search for work, we enjoy our children, and we live our lives. You probably won't believe it, but we truly did forgive the partner that night in October, and we still do. We forgive you as well. And that was it for the CREC for us and church in general for a long time after that. Long time.
Yeah. I don't blame you at all for any of that stuff after um after relaying that. So with all of this said, with your experience, with what you went through, with the duplicity, with the pastor, with the partners, with the church's relationship in all of this, what the church did, what the church didn't do, can you talk to listeners who might be looking at a CREC and see the stuff that you guys saw on the front end, at least that there's community there, or as everybody has said, there's community there, there's fellowship there, um, there's a lot of things there that are to be enjoyed. And at least on the front end, it looks like this is a gospel-centered community on the front end. But can you talk to those, whether it be this particular church or the CREC in general, and how they all these things are intertangled with one another, and are in the interests of sometimes money and sometimes other things, and not so much the people that they're taking care of. Can you talk to those who are looking at a CREC and saying, "Hey, maybe I want to worship there one day"?
If you're in line, it's great. If you fit the culture, it's great. If you don't have major health or economic problems, it's great. Um, but if you have any real long-term trouble, um, especially financial. Um, it, you lose status really fast. You lose friends really fast. We experienced this at the other couple other the other CREC teachers we were at, looking for work. Once it became clear that I wasn't going to find a job in a week, people started moving away from us, drifting away from us. Um, and what makes it so much worse in these particular churches is because and now this comes up time and time and again, and all the other people you've talked to too, the way everything is so intertwined. Your friends, your job, everything is connected. So if you lose one, you lose them all. You lose any one of these, you're going to lose them all, everything. And the only way to not lose everything is you have to be completely lockstep. You must obey no matter what. If I had just gone with that tax thing. In fact, if I had actually just taken it upon myself to just ignore that one receipt that destroyed the project or should have, I would have it would have been included different. Well, or at least different, completely different. Um, but just even because this partner, she wasn't in any leadership, and she couldn't be. This is the CREC, and she's a woman, but still, even and her husband wasn't in any leadership. And yet because um, you know, sh- money and just her being established in that church and um, money and power. She had money and power in this community.
I think what isn't so obvious on the front end is just how into power and authority the CREC is. And what's been consistent we've been in more than one CREC church is how much into um, money they all have been consistently too, and the power that comes with that. Um, and so they're so into power and authority, and your life becomes so much more intertwined with it than it would with any other church. And then they want you to think that if you fall on the wrong side of them, you are on the wrong side of God. You have fallen out of favor with God Himself. Um, and I just, people need to know that, especially if it is the desire of your heart to follow Jesus and you love Him, and this has happened to you, that more than likely you're standing up for something that's true and real and good. And your CREC church putting you on the outs or being upset with you does not mean that God is. Um, you have not fallen out of favor with God. You have fallen out of favor with a cult. And that is hard to reckon with.
Well, how many people have you talked to who, are no longer profess to be believers anymore? And we've known lots of people who had terrible things happening to them in this church, and they lose their faith over it. And I still wonder why we didn't lose ours sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
I really do. Like why? And I feel like this is just God is just saying, no, you're still here. You're still with me because we sure had enough going on to drive us out of the whole thing. Um, and so like having everything so connected, to get out, I always think back on like could we have done anything different? Was there any point where we could have gotten out sooner? We have walked out. What would that have looked like? It would have looked like um, just leaving the job. Quit. It would have been hard because I wouldn't have gotten unemployment. I needed them to fire me first, and also be in good standing when they did so. That's tricky business to be in that environment and operate so that they have to let you go without cause because we couldn't afford to be without the unemployment. And yet, sometimes I wonder, should we have just gone anyway, lost the livelihood, and just trusted that God is going to take care of us, even though we weren't going to know how? And I admit that I did not have enough faith for that. Not until everything was taken away. Once the job was gone and the church was gone, suddenly then I'm like, okay, God's going to take care of us. And we'd seen before, when we were looking for work, we had instances of people helping us out of the blue, like checks in the mailbox that are paying our rent, and we'd seen it, but how quickly you can forget it. And if we'd had the faith to just get out even without the job and everything and just walk away from it, maybe God would have taken care of us and we might have been spared some of the scars. Maybe, I don't know, but um, all that to say, be I firmly believe that if you're trapped in one of these churches and your livelihood is connected that way, just let it go. And it is not easy and it is super scary, but no livelihood, no job is worth what these churches will do to you because they know how much that job is, how important that work is to you.
Or the community that you have developed.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They know
it's
all of
so
it.
immersive.
Hmm.
It's so immersive.
They're fully aware of what you will lose, and they use that. Maybe not, there's no written manifesto that they use that. They're not going, ha ha ha, we've got you. But in practice, time and time again, they've got you, and it's in the back pocket.
But life is so much brighter on the outside. This Jesus is out here, guys.
Jesus is not a
He
church.
is. He's not a church, and he's out here. It's just really hard to take that step. He's Don't go looking for him in the CREC. Don't do it.
I want to thank both Jade Miller and the Anonymous Man for their vulnerability, courage, and desire to bring us into their story by sharing their experience. When the church is a hospital for sinners, it is a wonderful place. It's when the church is a museum for saints that you'll never fit in because they make sure you know it. May the church's mission always be to display the great physician himself, Jesus Christ. His word never bites, and his care only heals. As we conclude, if you have a story like Jade Miller's or the Anonymous Man's, please know you are not alone. Know we care about you, and many others do as well. Reach out to us. Find out how to do so in our show notes, but do so safely, especially if you're still in an environment like the movements we're profiling. There really is help out there for you, and we'll help you find it. Next week, we're not leaving the CREC. In fact, they'll continue to be in rotation. But we'll discover how they've influenced the broad Reformed world, a world in which I love. Next week, we begin to look at their influence in the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, the OPC. See you then. Sons of Patriarchy is brought to you by the administrators of Examining Doug Wilson in Moscow in partnership with Peter Bell. It's written, produced, and edited by Peter Bell. Original music, sound design, and mixing by Aaron Feeney. This series wouldn't be possible without the dozens of abuse survivors whose bravery and vulnerability make it what it is. Every episode was sent to them before being published, and their feedback, edits, encouragement, and eventual approval make this what it is. May your voices be heard far and wide. Thank you.